Hi there, just wanted to share a study on Hebrew word pictures, something that is very dear to my heart, and I just love them. And we're going to go into more depth in other studies, but we're going to take a look at one word in particular in this study today. It's the word grace in our language. In Hebrew, it's chen. The CH makes that lovely sound, and it is comprised of two letters. You'll see here, and I'll get my pointer here for you. It's comprised of a het, which is this right here, and the nun, which is right here. And it's actually mentioned in the King James translation. Strong's tells us that it's mentioned 69 times. And let's take a look. It says that it's used for the word grace, chen is, for grace 38 times, favor 26 times, gracious 2 times, pleasant 1 times, precious 1 times, and well favored with the other Hebrew word 2896 1 time. So let's take a look at some of the scriptures where we find this word grace. Genesis 6:8, but Noah found grace, there's that word, Hebrew 2580, in the eyes of the Lord. We see in a preceding verse 5, that God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. However, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. We also see in Genesis 39, verses 3-4, and we're referring to Joseph as he's come under in service. Unfortunately, remember how his brothers had sold him off into slavery. He went to Egypt. He now finds himself under the service of Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh who was a captain of the guard. And evidently through these verses you see that he recognizes that God's grace is upon Joseph. So we see here in verse 3, and his master, Potiphar, saw that the Lord was with him, Joseph, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house and all that he put into his hand. So despite this situation, Joseph still finds favor, and God's favor is upon him, and God is going to bring something good out of the situation, as we know he does. In Exodus 3:21, we also see this, and I will give this people favor, that same word chen, in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall come to pass that when you go, you shall not go empty. So there the Israelites were going to be rescued by God through his favor, through his grace and mercy. He was going to use Moses as his servant to redeem the Israelites out of Egypt, but they were not going to go empty-handed. Apparently, in verse 22, we see what they were going to be taking with them: jewels of silver, jewels of gold, and raiment. And that they were going to be able to put them on the sons and daughters, and that they would be basically spoiling the Egyptians. So they would come out of Egypt into the wilderness with all this gold and silver, much of which was going to be used for the making of the tabernacle. Then we also see this, Exodus 33:17, and the Lord said unto Moses, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by name. The Lord was going to lead them into the promised land, and Moses asks him to lead them. He doesn't want to go into the promised land without the leading of God. And Moses also asks the Lord to show him his glory. And in verse 19, God says, you're going to see my glory, my goodness. He declares he will show his grace and mercy to those he chooses. So here we see all sorts of different examples of the word chen, of this idea of God's grace in the Old Testament. It's not something that we just find in the New Testament under the gospel of grace, from Christ's death on the cross, but we're seeing pictures of that in the Old Testament. And here with the book of Ruth, we are also seeing this wonderful kinsman redeemer type of Boaz is a type of Christ being the kinsman redeemer. And here she is, Ruth 2:10. Then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, unto Boaz, Why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldst take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? Here's this Moabite woman who comes back to Israel with Naomi, and she is now wants to glean from the fields, and Boaz takes she finds favor with Boaz, and he says to her, you could glean from my fields when you're thirsty, drink from the vessels that my young men have drawn with water. And she is being fully protected by Boaz. So we see here a wonderful picture of the grace of Boaz, but the grace of God. She is being fully protected and given full provisions, even as an outsider. And as a Gentile, thought of as dogs, they were not supposed to marry anybody from Moab. Just think of the amazing gift of grace that we see, that she, an outsider, stranger, a Gentile, would actually then become the lineage of Christ. Psalm 84:11, we see, For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will be withheld from them that walk uprightly. So that same word, chen, that we're taking a good close look at, is our word for grace. And one of my favorite ones here is Zechariah 12:10. And yet to be in the future, although in the Old Testament it's a prophecy of right after the tribulation, at the end of the tribulation. And Zechariah prophesies, and I will pour upon the house of David. This is God is going to pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. So this is right midway of this 7-year tribulation. Believers, Jewish believers that hear that the Antichrist has come into the temple and made an idol, placed an idol there. It's that desolation of the abomination of desolation. And prophesied Daniel 12, and even Jesus forewarns them in Matthew 24, when you see this happening, run to the mountains and pray that this does not happen on a Sabbath. This was a warning to Israel, to the remnant believers, that then we're going to be, by God's grace, brought into Petra, they believe, in a place of protection. And I just want you to see, I'll get it again, this word grace. There's a sense of provision and protection. For 3.5 years, this remnant of Israel is going to be protected in Petra. They're going to be provided food and water. And by the way, were some Christian believers a few decades ago that really had studied this out, believes that this place in the wilderness is Petra, and they stashed a whole bunch of Bibles in there as provision spiritually for this remnant of Israel that's going to be there. And after the tribulation, Christ appears to them and pours out the spirit of grace. And as a nation now, The remnant is going to understand, their eyes are going to open, and they're going to realize this is Jesus who they had pierced. This is the Messiah. So the gospel of grace is often translated, this grace is often translated in like Sunday school as unmerited favor that only God can give, something that we did not deserve. As in a sinful state that we were in, we were bankrupt spiritually to pay for our own sin debt. But Jesus imputes, that's really kind of a banking term. Our balance was zero. We couldn't pay, we were in debt, we were bankrupt of any righteousness, but Jesus and his righteousness he imputes to our account. And so that his sacrificial death pays, redeems us, buys us, and it's nothing that we could actually ever earn. As I said, we are totally bankrupt, unable to earn any merit in God's eyes, because it's only by faith that we can please him. And so it is the ultimate gift of grace, is the sacrificial death on the cross of Christ. And we see this Ephesians 2:8-9. I just had thought about this when I was talking about Ruth. Here, Ephesians 2, verses 8-9. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. There is nothing of Ruth, because she, as I described, was a Gentile, and worse yet, a Moabite, and would be the lowest of lows. We as outsiders, it says in Ephesians, we as outsiders to God, would by his grace come into the fold. Remember how Jesus said that there was another fold. There was the sheepfold of Israel, but there was going to be coming another fold. That's us. And he was going to include us into the great fold. And by grace, not of works, lest anyone should boast. So let's take a look at this beautiful word that we've been looking at through the Old Testament and also in the New Testament, this idea of the gospel of grace of Christ. This word in Hebrew is chen. And as I said, it's comprised of the het, which is spelled out like that. So, and we read right to left. So het, and then the nun. So this is the nun. Okay. So this is a picture, a chart that in my other study that I just did, I was showing you. There's 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and in its ancient form, it was a pictographic language. So each letter had a picture. The oldest form of it, you could see the meaning a little bit better. For instance, let's take a look at the Aleph. Aleph was the first letter, and it, in its oldest form, looked like an ox head, right? So we could clearly see that looks like an ox head. All right. Now, let's take a look at where het is. Het is this letter right here, and it looked like a fence. Okay. This was the older version of it, and now it looks like this, actually. So it looks like a wall or a fence, and as this I'm showing here, it also refers to being separated. So set apart, fence, a wall. And what do we think of a fence? In this sense, this is a positive fence, because there's another word that we're going to take a look at another study that shows a negative connotation to a fence. But this one is a fence of protection. And Like everybody has a home, the walls are we have our home is our haven. The walls are our fence. We have a door that locks. We have walls. They protect us. We are inside our home. We are protected. In that sense, that is a very good connotation to have a fence, to be separate. We're separated from the weather, right? From the cold weather, from the rain. It protects us. And then we have the nun, and in its ancient form looked like that, which was either a picture of a seed, and then that would refer to life, right? The beginning of life, or actually fish. And in its present form, it looks like this. Okay, so again, this is how we're getting a picture, a word picture, is by taking each of the letters of a word, and in this case we're taking a look at chen, and we know chen is made up of the het and the nun, so each of these two letters of the alphabet in its pictographic form has a picture that identifies a deeper meaning. So you take one picture with one letter, bring it to another one, and together you make a word picture. And now we're going to take a look at what is the word picture that is created for this word that we know, grace. So again, I just wanted to show chen, here, het, and nun. So fence and life we could look at. The het is a fence, nun means life. So grace. I also wanted to take a look at the fact that this word is related. It has a verb that means to pitch a tent or to camp. The noun derived from this verse is machanach, and it means, it is found here in Genesis 26:17, and Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. So interestingly enough, the word that we're looking at, chen, is related to this idea of pitching a tent. Because see, we see this word chen right here, and then adding the letter he to the end makes it a verb that means to pitch a tent or to camp. And we're going to take a look at this. Again, we see it here, and it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all the night. This is Exodus 14:20. This is showing God's grace here, and that their camp of the Israelites was protected by God. Okay, and interestingly enough, when people encamped in the Bible lands, they would actually form an enclosure with their tents. So we see this in this picture. Here are all these tents, and I found this, first of all, on the ancient /Hebrew.org, but this is actually from a book called Manners and Customs of Bible Lands by Fred H. White. And here's a picture of how they would take their tents and make an enclosure that served really as a protective wall. So when they had sheep or any livestock in the middle there, these tents would be enclosed and would act as protection. So here's the sense that with this idea of grace, there's a fence and there's an idea of a tent of dwelling and around and a sense of protection within. Another second verbal root derived from the parent root is chanan, and it's got the Hebrew Strong's number 2603. Now this is rather interesting. We're kind of going a little deeper. We're looking at this word, and its root that's related to chen means healing, help, being lifted up, finding refuge. It means strength and salvation, literally being rescued. And as Strong states, to bend or stoop in kindness to an inferior, to favor, to bestow, to implore, to beseech. There's a whole list here. It's basically saying that this word is related to something that even goes deeper. It means that you're rescuing, you're giving salvation, this grace, this chen. You're showing mercy. You're having pity on somebody. You're showing that there is refuge within this grace. So grace, as we've looked, if we're going to combine the chet, which is a fence, and the nun as a life, we're getting this idea that is a fenced-in life. It's a place of protection. And we've looked at the different verbal roots of chen, the related words that we find with hen there, and it's conveying two things, like a pitched tent, a place of protection, again, the wall, the place of refuge, of mercy. See how we're enveloping this idea of grace, which actually is a very, well, it's a well-used word in Christianese. We use the word grace, and and it's an important, integral message to salvation, and we have, but as I often find with the Hebrew word pictures, a lot of the times these word pictures are so simple, like only a child could understand. They show the word in simplicity, and then finding it in scriptures, we're getting a better idea of what this grace is. Grace is stepping out from death into life, from having no hope to having hope, and to coming into a place of protection. And that's what I'm trying to convey here. I believe this is what this picture of chen is showing us. So yes, it's a fenced-in life, and it's a protected life. We see this gift of kindness and mercy, being healed, right? Healed of our sin, rescued and brought into a place of salvation and peace. And so I also wanted to show, when I think of a fenced-in life, I think of the sheepfolds. And here is a picture of a sheepfold, all with a stone wall. There's only one door, isn't there? And we totally can remember or relate to what Jesus was saying in John 10. Most assuredly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. The shepherd would lie at the door and protect his sheep. And we know that Jesus says he is the door, right? He is the door. And he is telling us that we are sheep. We need a shepherd. He is the good shepherd. He lies at the door. He protects anybody who's going to come and try to nab us, has to come through the door, has to come through him, basically. Anybody who's trying to jump over the wall, coming another way, he describes as a thief and a robber. John 10:2, he goes on to say, but he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. Verse 3, to him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. So this is a wonderful picture. Can't you see that this is the fenced-in life in an ancient form, in a pastoral form, that God is trying to convey to his people? That Jesus says, you are sheep, I'm the shepherd. You come in through my teaching, through me, through the blood of Christ that was sacrificed at the cross, and you come in and you will find grace here in a protected, fenced-in life, right? And I was just reading a devotional by a wonderful pastor, Pastor Barry Stagner, and he was writing something very interesting that I just wanted to add. The voice that whispers in your mind, you can't go home, you've gone too far, you're no longer welcome there in that fold. This is the voice not of Jesus, but it's the voice of the wolf, all right? Even if you've gone astray from God's grace, by God's grace, you can enter back in full protection. You've never lost your salvation. If you were truly saved, you never can lose your salvation, and God is wanting you to come back. Don't listen to the voice of the wolf that says, oh, I've gone too far. I've done too many things wrong. I've sinned as a believer. Well, there's always the picture of that prodigal son of coming back into the fold. And here is another example of God's grace, the ark. Noah and his family were protected, they were separated from the wrath of God. And we get that feeling from that letter het. But also that God's creation was going to be restored through Noah's family, and the animals that were within the ark, they would bring new life, which is, again, the picture that the letter nun creates in the new life. And there's the picture of the one door, which represents Jesus Christ, the one door of the ark. And this is the actual picture of the interior side of the door of the ark that's in Kentucky. And when I saw it, it really made an impact with me. That was the only door that was used to come in. And the door, it says Genesis 7:16, the Lord shut him in. So the Lord shut that door. And it's pretty sad in that, although we had the ark and it's a place of protection for Noah and the animals, but it could have been a place of protection for others, but they refused to come through that door, and they were shut out. And there is such a thing as the period of grace. You think of that as, you have a bill, but you have a period of grace that you have to pay it by, right? The church age is that period of grace. And there's coming a time where the door will be shut to anyone. And when the church is raptured, and that is another picture of grace, that we are going to be taken out and protected, separate from the wrath of God. But this door is open right now, but there's a time where that door is going to be shut. And it's just chilling to think of the sound that door must have made when the Lord God shut it. And so there's another picture there of grace. Now, another picture that I think of, having studied, the tabernacle, which was a place of dwelling for God, here is another example of God's grace. And I'm going to really show you a really neat picture of this. So Exodus 29:46, and they shall know that I am the Lord their God, who brought them up out of the land of Egypt, that I may dwell among them. I am the Lord their God. So here's God by, what does it say, by the wings of eagles. He brings them into the wilderness, protects them. As we saw, their camp was protected from the Egyptians by the pillar of smoke, or fire rather, that protected them that evening before God had opened up the Red Sea for them. And now in the wilderness, here he commands them to create a tabernacle, a tent, a place of dwelling that he would reside. And his presence was seen there, and we're going to take a look in the midst of the Israelites who were camped in the wilderness. Interestingly enough, too, we got to realize that this is a picture of Jesus himself, right? How Jesus, in John 1:14, it specifies and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's Jesus. And then actually Jesus says in John 14:6, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So I hope you're ready to get your minds blown, because I remember when I saw this next thing, it's like the light went off, and it was pretty amazing. All right. So every item of the tabernacle, every measurement, every material of the tabernacle, all cries Jesus Christ. All right. It's amazing. So here we see the white curtain that went all the way around, and it was around 7 feet tall. It was a protective barrier. Here the Israelites were camped all the way around outside of the tabernacle, but there was a wall, that same idea of the chen, the fenced-in life. Well, here's the fence. And again, just like the sheepfold, there was only one door coming in, and in rabbinical tradition actually refers to that door as the way. Okay, its name was literally the way. There was no other way to get into the inner court of the tabernacle. It was just by that door called the way. And you'd have to come past the sacrificial altar, and then to get into the holy place, the priests would come in here and into the holy place. Now that door was called, in rabbinical tradition, was called the truth. All right, and inside that area was the holy place, and it had the 7-branch menorah, the table of showbread, and also the altar of incense. So it was a place of service. So we've got the way, we've got the truth, and you guessed it, into the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest could go on the Day of Atonement. It was that curtain was called the life. And we know that that veil was ripped from top to bottom when Christ died on the cross. The high priest would have come and been making his sacrifice, sprinkling the blood of the sacrifice at the same time. He would have been saying, as the rabbis do, tetelestai here. Sorry, I've got to get into the camera. Tetelestai. This is the image of the Hebrew letter shin, which I'd love to teach about, because it represents the name of God El Shaddai, and he would have been saying over the altar, or the ark rather, it is finished. It is finished. And what did Jesus say on the cross? It is finished. And so here it is. We've got Jesus declaring that he is the way, the truth, the life. Here we see it in the form of the tabernacle, the way, the truth, the life. There's no other way. This is a picture of us coming into salvation through the way, Jesus, coming into service through the truth of knowing that it's not just by, we have to not work out our faith, but we have to produce fruit from our faith, or our faith is dead, James says. And a place of worship, a place of our prayers being offered up as the altar of incense, and then into the Holy of Holies. Amazingly enough, only a high priest was able to go into the Holy of Holies, but because the veil was ripped, torn, we are now able to come into the presence of God, and actually God indwells us. So it's a wonderful picture of grace. So yes, there is no other way to heaven but by Jesus. So I hope you've enjoyed this study on the word chen, which means grace. and that perhaps through these word pictures you might have found a fresh new way of looking at it. Again, the word pictures really illustrate in such a pure form some of these words, which I would love to do a series for you. It's pretty amazing. So we've looked at this idea of grace, this idea of a fenced-in life. It's a picture of Jesus. We've come under his protection, under his care. We've entered into the door. We've come into the fold. We're protected. We're surrounded by his love, his grace, his mercy. We're rescued, healed, we're comforted, and we're the recipients of mercy. And another thing that I do want to mention is, again, remember that there was this connotation with chet as being separate. And we are now separate, aren't we? We've been separated from our sin. He separates it as far as the east from the west. He does not remember our sin, he says to us, God says, and that we have come into a process of sanctification as we lead separate lives from the world, from our flesh, from our old self, our old Adam. We're born again, and we're coming in under his grace in full protection. So I hope this has been an interesting study. I think the next one I'm going to do is another word that begins with the Hebrew letter het, and it is chata. It means sin. So with this chen, we see that if the fence is a good fence, it has a good connotation, it's a protection, right? But with chata, this is a negative connotation to a fence. And I'll explain more in the upcoming study. So again, thanks for joining with me in this study. Meditate over it. I hope that you take a look at this and really study it out, and I hope that it has been a great blessing to you. And until then, we'll see you soon. Alrighty, bye-bye.